following the conclusion of the board meeting as well. The public are always welcome to email the board at boardmembers@lwsd.org. Director Mikov, would you like to do our land acknowledgement tonight?
Would. The Board of Directors of Lake Washington School District acknowledges that our district is on the indigenous land of the Coast Salish peoples who have reserved treaty rights on this land, including the Duwamish and the Snoqualmie Indian tribe. We thank these caretakers of this land who have lived here since time immemorial. We commit to continue collaborating with our Native community to teach the indigenous history of this land and these local tribes to all children of the district. We also commit to provide the best possible education for all children of Native descent who attend our schools.
I will now entertain a motion to approve the June 22nd, 2026 agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved by Director Mikov and seconded by Director Yoakum to approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Tonight, the board will hold its annual organization meeting in accordance with Operational Governance Policy, OGP 5. The board shall elect among its members a president and a vice president to serve one-year terms. Additionally, the board shall elect a legislative representative to serve for a one-year term. I will now turn the gavel over to Dr. Holman, who will hold temporary chair until the president is elected. Dr. Holman.
Thank you, and it's every year at this moment where I actually wish we had an actual gavel for you to hand over, but for tonight I'll accept the gavel in proximity. So the process does call for nominations to be formally opened and closed, and so nominations will now be opened. These do not need a second, and we will vote by roll call. So are there any nominations now for the open president seat of the Lake Washington School Board of Directors?
I nominate Director Lisa Guthrie.
Director Guthrie has been nominated. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none. So Lisa Guthrie has been nominated for president of the Lake Washington School Board of Directors. Again, as I said, nominations do not need a second, and there were no additional nominations. So there's been one nomination, and that is for president, and that is Lisa Guthrie. I'll now do a roll call vote. Director Yoakum?
Yes.
Director Richter?
Yes.
Director Mikov?
Yes.
Director LaLiberty?
Yes.
And Director Guthrie?
Yes.
So Lisa, you have been nominated and elected unanimously to serve again as board president. Congratulations and thank you for this last year of service. You did a remarkable job, and I hand the gavel back.
Nominations are now open for vice president of the board.
I nominate Lindsay Yoakum.
Lindsay Yoakum has been nominated for vice president of the Lake Washington Board of Directors. Nominations do not need a second. Are there other nominations for vice president of the board? If there are no other nominations for vice president of the board, I declare the nominations to be closed. There's been one nomination for vice president, and that is Lindsay Yoakum. We will now do a roll call vote. Director Yoakum.
Yes.
Director Richter.
Yes.
Director Mikov.
Yes.
Director LaLiberty.
Yes.
And Director Guthrie, yes. Lindsay Yoakum is elected by unanimous vote to be vice president. Congratulations. Nominations are now open for legislative representative of the board.
I nominate Aspen Richter.
Aspen Richter has been nominated for legislative representative of the board. Nominations do not need a second. Are there any other nominations for legislative representative? If there are no other nominations, I declare the nominations to be closed. There has been one nomination for legislative representative of the board, and that is Aspen Richter. We will now do a roll call vote. Director Yoakum.
Yes.
Director Richter.
Yes.
Director Mikov.
Yes.
Director LaLiberty.
Yes.
And Director Guthrie, yes. Aspen Richter is elected by unanimous vote to be legislative representative. Congratulations. All right, next item on the agenda is the superintendent report. Dr. Holman.
Great. So tonight I'll present using ClickShare. And thank you for moving the superintendent's report up in the meeting agenda. I think it's just really important to share as early as possible the results from our annual audits. As you know, the state auditor's office comes and spends about 6 months on site. We have to designate an actual office space for them. Margot Allen is the individual who really is the key contact for the state auditor's office. And this is really work that it is detailed. It takes a long time. And it's really important because it does demonstrate in a very transparent way, seeing that our audit results are publicly available for this year and many years past, available to the public. And so this is our the second year where we've actually started to present this at board meetings. It's not a requirement. The requirement is to share the results with the board directly. We do that through email, but we just think it's really important to also share publicly those results, knowing that if there are findings or errors or anything like that, that would be part of the reporting to the board in the public meeting. And so the 2026 audit results are looking back to the 24-25 fiscal year. And so that is the similar cycle that we follow each year. So a year from now, it will be for the 25-26 school year. And so this is the state audit for fiscal year ending August 31st, 2025. And so the purpose of the audit, it's conducted by the Washington State Auditor's Office. Each school district in the state goes through the same audit process annually. The scope is accountability, financial statements, and federal grant compliance. And related to federal grant compliance, they choose different federal grants or programs that they audit on an annual basis. And what's the purpose and the objective? And we hear this from the auditor's office as well. It really is to ensure transparency and compliance with laws and regulations. And if an organization isn't compliant, that they provide direction and insight to become compliant. And so the overall audit results, and this is the language that the auditor's office uses. They offered an unmodified opinion on financials and federal compliance. And what does that mean? That's as good as it gets. That means our audit was clean. There were no significant deficiencies in internal controls, no findings of material weakness, and no non-compliance requiring disclosure. And so as you can imagine, as we go through this audit process, it is a process of engagement, conversation. As they dig, they ask for more information and data to work with other directors. And so it isn't a straightforward process. It's a process that is always evolving. So key areas reviewed in our accountability audit this year. So any payroll leave that was cashed out, they audited that. Tracking and monitoring of theft-sensitive assets, audited our cash receipting and deposit timelines related to third-party contractors, things like ticketing, online fees and fines, our lunch payment software. They audited professional learning and local revenue for enrichment activities. As you know, enrichment activities are tied to our educational programs and operations levy, so they audited the professional learning expenditures related to that. They audited, again, within our EP&O levy expenditures, supplemental contracts, and an example of that for our teaching staff. Leap days come as a supplemental contract to their regular contract. And so they audited any expenses related to supplemental contracts that are also connected to the educational programs and operations levy. They audited open public meeting compliance. And so the process that the board just went through in nominating and identifying leadership as a board, all of our public notifications, our minutes, like they dug in to ensure that we're compliant with all of those elements. And then financial condition and indication of financial distress. So the state auditor's office has, they call it the FIT tool, and it's a financial kind of outlook tool to make sure that entities, and it actually looks at more than just school districts. It looks at all government agencies in the state of Washington, and school districts don't actually fit perfectly into that, and I had a chance to meet with the auditor's office to talk to them about how they could actually use their tool, make slight modifications to make it much more relevant to indicate financial conditions of school districts, because it is a public tool, and wanting to make sure that our financial condition is accurately communicated to the public. And I talked about financial statements and federal programs, and so they look at financial statements and internal controls, meaning do we have processes and procedures related to the incoming revenue and outgoing expenditures? Like, do we actually have processes to do that well? And then the federal program that they evaluated was our child nutrition program. And so spent significant time with Ralph and the team in food services. And again, this is a lengthy process that takes many staff, takes hours and hours. They're on site for a long time. And so just want to thank our school staff that work towards compliance with the identified processes and procedures for all of the different elements that come with cash handling, for payroll, for everything that comes with making sure that when the auditor comes in, they see our processes, our reporting, our procedures, and they do identify it as clean. And then just a big thank you again to Margot Allen, our Director of Accounting, the Business Services team. That's a team that small but mighty is an understatement. And then anytime, so that food services was the program that was audited this year, just the amount of time and effort they spent to provide the auditors with what they need. And so, again, this is an annual process. And so starting in, I believe, January, the auditor's office arrives back in district for the spring 2027 audit, which will look at the 25-26 school year. Estimated costs for the audit is around $127,000 per year plus travel, and the scope is accountability, financials, and federal programs. And so glad I can again present to the board a clean audit and share with the public that we continue to demonstrate financial responsibility.
Thank you, Dr. Holman and staff. The next item on the agenda will be public comment. The Board of Directors of Lake Washington School District welcomes the public to the business meetings of the board and encourages community engagement. The board dedicates 30 minutes to hear from the public during the public comment portion of the public comment period of the meeting, with each individual provided up to 2 minutes to speak. Participants should not expect a response from the board at the end of their comments, as we dedicate this time to listening to your voice and would like to get as many members of the public an opportunity to speak as the time allows. If you have materials you would like distributed to the board, please leave them in the basket next to the podium. Each speaker will be called to the podium in the order of sign up. A timer will appear on the screen showing your remaining time. When you have 30 seconds left, the timer will turn yellow to let you know you're nearing the end. When 10 seconds remain, the timer will turn red as a signal to wrap up your comments. Please note that the microphone will be turned off shortly after your time expires, so we ask all speakers to conclude when their time is complete. I'd also like to remind everyone here this evening that this opportunity to engage in dialogue is also an opportunity to model respectful discourse to our students and our community. We ask that the audience refrain from commenting and from prolonged applause following each comment, as it takes up time and prevents us from listening to as many speakers as we can fit in to our dedicated 30 minutes. Once the public comment portion of our business meeting concludes, we ask that everyone who is not interested in listening to the rest of the agenda items exit quietly and in an orderly fashion so that we can continue the rest of our meeting. Members of the public can sign up to participate on the district website. Sign up closes at noon on the day of the board meeting, and comments will be offered in the order of sign up. Speakers can designate another person to speak in their place in advance of the noon deadline, but speaker substitutions at the meeting unfortunately cannot be accommodated. As a reminder, the board does not discuss personnel matters at board meetings. Members of the community are encouraged to attempt to resolve issues with teachers, school principals, or other district personnel before bringing issues to the board. Additionally, speakers should refrain from naming students unless they are the parent or guardian of said student. Public comment will now begin at 7:16 p.m. The first speaker is Rebecca Downs.
Hello, I'm a product of this district, a 14-year educator in this district, and a parent trusting this district with my own children. I have one simple question for you. Would you choose the educational experience we are creating for students today for your own child? Because I do not. My year-long data collection found that 7th graders spend an average of 5 hours a day on recreational screens outside of school, not including homework. Teachers' data concluded technology made this job significantly harder and are fighting to bring paper, discussion, and hands-on learning back into their classrooms. Elementary teachers are being asked to implement a reading curriculum that is entirely digital. And next year, middle school math is moving to a fully digital curriculum in classrooms where students are already struggling with daily anxiety, disengagement, and frustration. I hosted a parent night at my school about technology. Parent after parent stood up and shared the same message: get rid of the screens. Lake Washington School District messaging says we are concerned about student social skills and mental health, but continues to build a school system that places children behind screens. We now dedicate time to teaching social emotional skills through required lessons, yet many of those skills used to be built naturally in classrooms through collaboration, struggle, discussion, and face-to-face interaction. We have removed many of the experiences that develop resilience and connection, then wonder why students need separate lessons to learn this. At a time when families and teachers are raising concerns about screen dependence, I am asking the board to pause the expansion of fully digital curriculum. We are not preparing students for the future. We are preparing them for addiction and poor social emotional skills. I'm not going away about this topic. I will continue educating parents in this district on what's really going on, building a movement about what children really need to thrive. I deeply care about the kids in this district so much. So I will be back. I will continue talking about this, and I will continue collecting data because I know it matters and I care about these kids. So I'll see you soon.
The next speaker is Nitya Subramanian.
Good evening. I am an LWSD parent at Timberline Middle School. I'm here tonight because I'm concerned about the fact that our children keep their smartphones on them during school hours. Right now, our district uses the off and away in backpacks rule. But honestly, it's just an honor system and it isn't working. Students easily bypass it by hiding phones under desks, sneaking them into bathrooms, and masking them behind books. Expecting children to resist a smartphone is an unfair fight between a developing brain and multi-billion-dollar algorithms designed to hook them. In the book, The Anxious Generation, Jonathan Haidt talks about 4 pillars to save kids' mental health. The very first is making schools phone-free from bell to bell. Superintendent Report has been pushing to clear out these classroom distractions, and Governor Ferguson is working on a statewide away for the day mandate. We don't have to wait or guess if this works. Schools in Seattle, North Shore, Merced Island, and Walla Walla have stepped up and put real physical boundaries in place, like classroom cubbies or secure pouches. Their data shows a sharp drop in behavioral incidents, less cyberbullying, and a measurable jump in real-world peer relationships. In fact, we just saw this potential right at Timberline Middle School. In May, our health teacher encouraged a screen-free week where 160 students chose to go completely phone-free. The feedback afterwards was incredibly positive and encouraging from teachers, parents, and students themselves. So my ask for the board is simple. Let's stop relying on passive rules and build a real physical infrastructure. I urge you to mandate a strict district-wide bell-to-bell phone deposit system this fall using lockable cubbies or pouches. Let's take the burden of this digital battle off our kids' shoulders so they can just focus on being students. Thank you.
The next speaker is Emma Horowitz.
Hello, good evening. My name is Emma Horowitz, and I'm a parent of 2 at Robert Frost Elementary. Both of my sons had Jeffrey Erickson as their kindergarten teacher, and I volunteered in his classroom nearly every week for more than 2 years. I am also a licensed clinical social worker. For more than 15 years, I have worked in systems responsible for protecting children and investigating concerns about dangerous adult behavior. My career has taught me 2 equally important things. First, every allegation involving a child deserves to be taken seriously. Second, allegations do not exist in a vacuum. Adults bring biases, assumptions, agendas, and fears into every system. That is why fairness and careful scrutiny matter so much. Before my children started at Frost, a neighbor warned me not to send them there. She believed that it was unsafe to have a gay man teaching children kindergarten. That experience reminded me that these biases still exist. My greatest concern today is that perception has become reality. For the second time this year, Mr. Erickson has been removed from the classroom. The first investigation did not substantiate the fears and rumors that circulated. Yet now, because it has happened twice, people are beginning to assume there must be something to it. That is how reputational harm happens, through repetition, speculation, and the assumption that where there's smoke, there must be fire. The teacher I know is very different. What I observed in Mr. Erickson's classroom was not simply a safe teacher. I observed one of the most gifted educators I have ever encountered. He makes children feel seen, valued, and capable. He treated every child as if they mattered. Our walkout, the 100+ letters submitted to this district on his behalf, and the families who continue to fill these seats are not evidence of a popularity contest. They are evidence of the extraordinary impact one educator has had in this community. Tonight, I am asking this board to consider whether bias, intentional or not, may be contributing to the narrative surrounding
Please
Mr.
wrap up your
Erickson,
comment.
and to ensure that every employee, including those identified.
Next up is Beth Burns.
Hi, my name is Beth Burns, and I have 2 kids at Frost Elementary. This year, my 4th grader, Harlow, was in a classroom with a teacher who repeatedly misgendered them and fostered a culture of shame and humiliation. My documented concerns to the principal, along with other families, went unanswered for most of the school year until Harlow was moved from the classroom in late January. My other child, Chloe, had Mr. Erickson this year, the kind of teacher you can only hope your kid gets. Mr. Erickson was removed from the classroom November 4th. Parents were not informed until November 17th. He returned in late January only to be removed a second time in June, 2 days after an alleged incident and 6 days before the end of the school year. I have caught myself thinking, he's been removed twice. Could there be more to the story? But as a gay woman, I know better. We call this lavender baiting, implying a queer teacher poses a risk to children without evidence as a way to fuel doubt and extinguish community action. It spreads through innuendo and speculation, and it is powered most by the district's own silence. A beloved teacher was removed twice, both times within days of an alleged incident. A documented pattern of harm in a 4th grade classroom affecting multiple students took 5 months to produce any action, and even then, the teacher remained in the classroom through the end of the year. Principal Holtman has shown he can act within days. This community has seen what he prioritizes and what he doesn't. The question is why? I am asking this board tonight to explain that disparity, why these 2 situations were handled so differently in the same school in the same year by the same principal, and whether the allegations against Mr. Erickson were ever independently scrutinized or just simply accepted. This board has stayed silent while we filled in the gaps. That ends tonight. We are asking you directly for the answers this community has earned and for the return of a teacher who is an integral part of it. Thank you for your time.
The next speaker is Amelia Dolan.
Hi, I'm back. In January, I stood before you guys to speak about the 10-week removal of Mr. Erickson, one of Frost's finest teachers. Here I am again, much like the Eastlake student who spoke before me in January for the second time about needing a wheelchair ramp to access her school. I trust that after she spoke, the district took immediate action to provide the basic access she deserved. I'm back because our community is still asking for something basic too: transparency. How is it that I seem to know more from the conversations happening around our communities than from the district itself? Families are hearing references to a video. People claim they have seen it. The phrases I keep hearing are, "It's really bad," and that there are two sides to every story. If there are two sides, what's the other side? Because from where our community sits, all we know is that for the second time this school year, a beloved teacher and educator at Frost has been removed from our school. The first time, Mr. Erickson returned without answers, and many families were left to fill in the blanks themselves. Now we are here again. You often cite privacy as the reason information cannot be shared. I understand the importance of privacy, but I also ask you to consider the privacy, reputation, and humanity of the person at the center of all of this. When information is shared with some people but not others, secrecy does not protect a community. It creates rumors, it creates division, and it damages trust. Students are paying attention. We see the confusion, we hear the conversations, and we feel the uncertainty. I'm not asking you to violate anyone's privacy. I'm asking you to recognize that transparency and accountability matter too. I also want to ask how you plan to address the hundreds of letters that have been submitted to the district in any way, shape, or form. Our community deserves better than rumors, our students deserve better than uncertainty, and Mr. Erickson deserves fairness, dignity, and respect. Thank you, guys.
The next speaker is Anupama Sankara.
Good evening, everyone. I'm a parent of 2 children in LWSD schools. I'm speaking today to urge the board to restrict video games and recreational screen usage on school-issued laptops and within our campuses. Our intentions with technology were noble, but the daily reality is compromising our children's health, social development, and education. We are seeing a direct impact on basic student well-being. As a lunch volunteer, I've seen this firsthand. Every day in the cafeteria, a movie is played during lunch, and in addition to that, students are allowed to play video games on their devices. In this screen-heavy environment, many students are seen dumping their entire lunches into the trash to immediately play. Some others don't eat at all, or they rush to grab a popsicle in the final 5 minutes after staring at a screen the entire period. This environment is leaking into special events too. At a recent end-of-year fun fest, instead of active celebration, students were allowed to use their personal phones specifically to play video games. This addiction follows them into the classroom, hindering focus and forcing teachers to act as digital police officers using monitoring tools like Dino. Furthermore, video games are replacing essential human connection. Students are missing out on casual face-to-face conversations and meaningful interactions with their friends and classmates. We already know there is a better way. Our tech-free days have proven that when screens go away, kids happily pivot to board games and genuine interaction. These are young, developing minds learning to practice self-control. School should be a safe haven to foster these skills, not a testing ground where they must constantly battle hyperstimulation. For the sake of our students' health, focus, and social growth, I respectfully ask LWSD to implement a strict no video games policy on school devices and campuses. Thank you.
The last speaker is Karina De Mello Itabarahi. Sorry, feel free to introduce yourself.
Okay, my name is Karina De Mello Itabarahi. I'm a parent at Robert Frost Elementary. Okay, yeah. So during 2 years ago, my daughter was a student of Mr. Erickson's kindergarten classroom, and I served as a weekly classroom volunteer. Because I'm fluent in Portuguese and a little bit in English, I engaged as informal interpreter for the Brazilian families in his classroom who spoke zero English. Families and kids, first time in a public school, so it was a big deal for them. In my time volunteering, I witnessed a level of culturally responsive teaching that's rare. Mr. Erickson had 4 Brazilian students who entered the school year with absolute language barriers and social anxiety. Mr. Erickson created a deeply empathetic, humanized environment. He looked past the language barrier to care for the well-being of the students and their families. As a direct result of his intentional, inclusive framework, I watched these kids experience immensely social, emotional, and intellectual development. The profound impact of his advocacy is shared among multilingual families. I have here a letter of an immigrant mother whose son was in Mr. Erickson's class last year. This mother does not speak or write in English. She wrote this letter in Portuguese, and I have attached the translation as well. She was afraid of her son would not adopt in public school because he could not speak any English. And she's very thankful for Mr. Erickson because his rare dedication and target support felt comfortable, her family felt comfortable, and all the kids felt comfortable. So I'm talking about the immigrants and the safety of those kids. We need Mr. Erickson back.
This concludes public comment. Thank you to those that participated and attended to engage with the board. As we move forward with the meeting, if you decide to remain at our meeting, we ask that all attendees are respectful and honor standard meeting protocols. Keeping side conversations to a minimum and voices at the lowest level possible is expected of all attendees. If you decide to leave at this time, please do so in an orderly and quiet manner so the board can continue their business meeting. Again, thank you for coming and participating this evening. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the June 22nd, 2026 consent agenda. I will now entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Move approval.
Seconded.
It has been moved by Director LaLiberty and seconded by Director Meekov. Superintendent Holman, will you please poll the board?
I will. Vice President Yocum,
Yes.
Director Richter,
Yes.
Director Meekhoff,
Yes.
Director LaLiberty,
Yes.
and President Guthrie.
Yes. Motion carries. Superintendent Holman, will you please review the donations?
Yes, in the board's packet tonight, you have over $166,000 of donations coming from a variety of sources, from PTSAs, Barton, Einstein, Lakeview, Meade, Rockwell, and Tesla STEM PTSAs. We also have a donation from our Lake Washington Schools Foundation that just completed a drive to collect funds for students that had significant student lunch debt. And so that's over $13,000 of this donation. And then the Wolves Football Association, I'm going to guess that that's Eastlake. Eastlake High School donation from a private source to Eastlake High School for weight room equipment. So again, we're just always grateful and thankful to a community that is willing to donate to our schools.
Thank you. No legislative update tonight?
Staff does not have a report tonight.
Excellent. We will move on to the first item on the agenda, which is policy revision for OE10. That policy is learning environment treatment of students. Dr. Holman.
Well, the journey continues with OE10, and so excited to be at this point. When the board began this process over a year ago, I'm not sure we really knew kind of the road that this would go. We knew that updating the policy was the right thing. We knew that talking with, kind of key folks related to this, be that students or adults, and so we just entered into the process and were willing to let the next step really be defined by what we determined was the right next step. And so I really do appreciate that about this this process. I grabbed some of the elements related to this, and as we think about the learning environment and treatment of students from a policy perspective, it could be argued that this is one of the most important policies that that the board has, because the learning environment, the treatment of students, like that is the essence and heart and soul of what our students experience each and every day in our schools. And so you can see here, starting in August of 2024, wow, that's almost 2 years come August. That it's been an ongoing conversation ever since August 2024, when I know my team brought some information to the board. We visited some frameworks that could help us think about this work. We brought the Danielson framework related to instruction and teaching, and that's the framework we use for the evaluation of our teaching staff. And you can see in August of 2025, we actually had a first reading of OE10. And at that point, that was an updated policy that the board said, well, we're going to adopt policy. And then what I don't have in here is the draft interpretation and indicators that I brought forward to the board. And we knew we weren't going to take action on those, but it was kind of a springboard to say, like, conceptually, are we headed in the right direction? The board also knew that engaging students in this was going to be critical, and I'm not sure we knew how critical. But tonight really is about how did student feedback fundamentally shift the board's thinking and mindset related to this policy, and in doing that, shift the policy language which was adopted earlier this school year. The board, we were hoping a couple of our student reps could be here tonight to also not only be thanked, but just to hear publicly how influential their work. Our 4 student board reps partnered with Director Fu and his team to develop a very meaningful process for them to go and meet with peers related to OE10, and they had very deep discussions around their experiences and their thinking related to, yes, this policy, but really just their experiences in our schools to then help inform the conversation related to this policy. At the extended study session in March, this board spent somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 to 3.5 hours taking the student feedback, the adopted policy from September 2025, and really unpacking the recommendations that our student board reps brought forward to then engage in the what next conversation. And the direction to me was to bring back updated policy language. And as I spent significant time from my notes from the extended study session, going back into the students' feedback, the data that they brought forward. It isn't just updated policy language, it is almost wholesale change to all of the policy language. And so I think just given that robust process, I think it would be important also to outline how did the student feedback actually help shape OE10 as a policy. And so I've said this already, student voice played a critical role in strengthening this policy. It didn't just strengthen the policy, it informed us as adults related to not only the experiences that our students are having, but really the aspirations we have for our schools and our classrooms, and ultimately what our students are experiencing in their environments. And so I'll walk through each of these pieces. One of the big components of feedback was related to relationships, belonging, and peer connections. And the key shift in the policy language was really from a general positive relationship to an intentional system for belonging and peer connection. And so really helped the board shift mindset related to what types of relationships. And so the students said belonging often came from peer groups, not the broader school environment. And as we think about belonging, we continue to talk about our schools being a place where belonging is found. And so that was important feedback from the students. Students articulated that some students lack trusted adults in their school. And the body of literature related to students having a trusted adult in their schools, it is across the board in the literature and research that it takes one trusted adult for a student to feel connected to their school. And just knowing that that trusted adult is present is key. And so hearing from our students that that is lacking for some of our students was influential. And a desire for stronger student voice and connection. And we heard that from our students, not just in the OE10 presentation that they gave to us, but really across the board. And so the policy changed around explicit inclusion of peer-to-peer relationships and a sense of belonging for all students. It was strengthened through an emphasis on culturally responsive practices and the emphasis on restorative approaches. Restorative approaches being those approaches to dealing with behavior or conflict such that the individuals involved actually are being restored. There's growth, development, and it isn't just a punitive approach. We know punitive approaches have significantly less effective. They are significantly less effective. We also know that restorative approaches take more time. Some of our staffing models are aligned with restorative approaches with some of those pieces in place. So the second component was a culture of learning and the student experience. And so the key shift was from an instruction focus to student experience to student experience and engagement centered learning environments. So it really was around like what is the environment and engagement that our students enter into and experience in their classrooms. So what did our students say? High stress and workload imbalance. That was something we heard from our student reps through this process. We heard it through the school start time process. We heard it through the 7-period day process. And that is true for some students, and that's not true for all students. But it was an important element that our student reps brought forward. A desire for engaging instruction and relevant learning. And, I think that is also youth today. They want relevancy. They want engagement. And so I think that's a really key piece. And then a desire for opportunities for ownership of learning. And it's interesting to think about engaging instruction, relevant learning, and ownership of learning. And when you think about the curriculum, that the instructional resources that we just adopted, those resources are, those concepts are interwoven into that. The pedagogy required to deliver those instructional resources with fidelity requires that our teachers think about engagement, relevancy, and ownership of students. And so how the policy changed added intellectual risk-taking, perseverance, student ownership, and support so students can thrive. Strengthened a focus on purposeful use of time, and added equitable supports and student engagement. The next concept, harm, bullying, and identity-based experiences. And so the key shift was from behavior expectations to systems that addressed harm and restore environments. Again, it isn't just for our students. They said it's not good enough just to have an expectation. You actually need systems that are responsive to situations and environments. And so the students talked about reports of racism, bullying, and microaggressions, perception that incidents were inconsistently addressed, and reporting systems were unclear and consequences were insufficient. And on that third bullet point, reporting systems were unclear. That is such great feedback for the adults because are there reporting systems? Absolutely. And if our students don't understand them and don't know about them, how great can those systems be? And so it was just really good feedback from our students related to this. So how did the policy change? It added clearly established systems, explicit inclusion of language related to bullying, harassment, discrimination, and microaggressions, and added repairing harm, not just responding to, and peer-to-peer relationships. And they talked about, yes, the classroom environment, but they also talked about the physical kind of condition of the school, the physical environment that they're walking into each and every day. And so the key shift in the policy language went from general environment to intentional, maintain learning environments that support engagement. They talked about things like having pride in the school environment, cleanliness of the school, access to restrooms. Like they really did talk about the physical environment quite a bit. Oh, speaking of that, what did the students say? They talked about concerns about cleanliness, broken facilities, overcrowding. Like these are things that were top of mind for students that our reps spoke with. Impact of student dignity and engagement, and the impact on overall sense of school quality connected to kind of their sense of pride for their school. They articulated that they wanted to feel a sense of pride for their actual physical school, and so that's why these things were meaningful to them. And then how did the policy change? Strengthened to include designed, structured, and maintained in terms of the environment, connection to student engagement and learning, and then focused on measurable conditions. Removed subjective term such as comfort, like that was in the board's prior policy language, and so comfort is miserably impossible to try and measure, and so knowing that there's other terms that are more specific that are can actually be measured, moved away from terms like comfort. And then access to facilities. And in their minds, it was different. There was the physical environment that they're in, but then are we thinking about the actual accessibility to our schools and sites and classrooms? And so the key shift was from embedded concept to elevated standalone policy priority related to accessibility and basic needs. And so what did the students said? They talked about barriers to accessibility, things such as mobility challenges. They talked about also just in general issues with restrooms and shared spaces. We heard a number of different stories related to those things. They talked about impact on participation, dignity, and trust in the system. And, all of those things related to kind of access and basic needs. And so how did the policy change? Has an explicit focus on equitable and inclusive access, full participation in learning as a named goal. And, we have talked about inclusive learning environments, and our students talked about full participation in learning. And I think they're very closely connected to one another. But for our students, it was really about we have varying needs and learning styles in our classroom, and not everyone is benefiting. And so they just talked about really that full participation. Named examples, classrooms, ingress, egress, restrooms, and common areas. And then, this might be the last section, safety and student well-being. And so key shift from emergency response to comprehensive safety systems across the full continuum. And so we, in the prior policy, it really was about kind of, well, emergency response, that there's systems for emergency response. And so our students talked about emotional safety concerns tied to bullying and identity-based harm, a desire for better prevention and clearer response systems, and a desire for stronger adult intervention. And so policy change, it expanded to include physical and emotional safety, added prevention, early identification and intervention, and added threat assessment and recovery. And I believe this is the final section, grading, feedback, and fairness. And I know the board has had an interest related to grading for a number of years. It almost predates most of you on the board. We've been talking about policy related to grading. And we started to think about it in our September adoption of OE10. And the students had additional feedback. And so the key shift is from grading policies to assessment systems that support learning and equity. So the students talked about inconsistent grading across teachers, rigid policies that didn't account for mental health or outside responsibilities, and desire for clear expectations and more meaningful feedback. And so the policy changed it strengthened to include multiple measures of learning, added feedback that supports improvement, and added equitable and consistent grading. And so you can see, and there was some overlap in the feedback from students because their feedback really did address multiple policy components. But you can see they implored us to think bigger than what we were thinking about in the prior policy. They asked us to think about the system more deeply and to think about students from all backgrounds having a positive experience in school. And so I'm going to, for our first reading, I'm actually going to switch over to the policy. I do have it in the slide deck. It actually doesn't come across as well as I wanted it to, so I'm just going to scroll through. Okay, I have to switch this real quick. There we go. Okay, and so I'm just going to go through and read this, and I can tell you the preamble is updated, and I'm going to blame President Guthrie for that, and so she gave language related to that. And then as I was going through this, you won't see this in any other policy. There's headers for each policy section, and what that helped was to kind of, for me, it was really helpful to kind of see the various components that are kind of listed in the policy, and again, those can remain or those can be excluded. And so, but for tonight, they're there. And so the preamble states, the board believes that the conditions in which students learn have a direct impact on their capacity to learn and their ability to achieve academic and personal goals. For many students, the quality of the learning environment will determine whether they thrive or struggle in school. The board commits to creating and sustaining excellent learning environments that are designed with student needs at the center and that are responsive to the full range of students we serve. 10.1 is about relationships and belonging. It states, ensure learning environments cultivate positive relationships between students and staff and among peers, foster a strong sense of belonging for all students, promote culturally responsive practices, and support restorative approaches to resolving conflict. 10.2 is about a culture of learning. Ensure learning environments promote a culture of learning by teaching effective strategies, providing opportunities for students to take ownership of their work, encouraging perseverance and intellectual risk-taking, and providing consistent academic and social emotional support so that students can thrive. 10.3 is about purposeful and equitable conditions for learning. The policy states, ensure learning environments are intentionally designed and structured to use instructional time, practices, and supports purposefully and equitably in order to support high levels of student engagement and learning. 10.4 talks about systems to address harm and promote pro-social behavior. The policy states, ensure learning environments include clearly established systems and practices to prevent, address, and repair harm resulting from behaviors including bullying, harassment, discrimination, and microaggressions, and that these environments foster understanding, respect, positive peer-to-peer relationships, and the development of pro-social student behavior. 10.5 talks about learning environments. Policy states ensure learning environments are intentionally designed, structured, and maintained to support student engagement and effective learning and to provide equitable and accessible learning environments. 10.6 talks about access to facilities. Ensure students have equitable and inclusive access to district facilities, learning spaces, and essential school environments so that all students can fully participate in learning, including access to classrooms, ingress and egress, restrooms, common areas, and other spaces necessary for the school day. 10.7 is about safety systems. States ensure learning environments are supported by comprehensive safety systems that promote physical and emotional safety and include coordinated practices for prevention, early identification, and intervention, threat assessment, crisis response, and recovery so that students and staff are secure and supported in the learning environment. And finally, 10.8 is about assessment and grading practices. Ensure assessment and grading practices are intentionally designed and implemented to support student learning by incorporating multiple measures of learning, providing regular and timely feedback that supports improvement, and applying equitable and consistent approaches to evaluating student learning and determining grades. So that is presented to the board for discussion and a first reading tonight. I'm happy to answer questions. I'm also going to take notes based on the board's conversation as we are scheduled to take action tonight, but if there are requests for updates or modifications, I can do that as well.
Any questions, comments? Director Meekoff.
I just want to say that, I really appreciate the work that's been done here and the changes around, especially the subjective language. And I feel like it really does accurately reflect the student work as well as our conversations. I don't think I'm alone in loving this policy. And I think my concern is putting this policy language into intentional and consistent practice throughout the district is really what's on my mind. So thank you very much.
Director LaLiberty?
I'm pro headings. I think this could be something. What? Yeah. Someone had to say it. I think actually this really helps in terms of readability and sort of signposting through, and also just making sure that we're covering at a high level all the things that we're talking about. So great idea, and I think as we think about other policies, we should think about implementing this too. It just helps the typical reader too to get through it as well.
Director Richter?
I will also say that I appreciate all the work that went into the rewrite. Usually I prefer a red line, and I did in fact take the old and the new policy and put them right next to each other to figure out what had changed, and that took a good long while. And I saw why a red line wouldn't really have helped in this case, because it was in fact such an extensive rewrite. I think it flows lovely, like Director LaLiberty. I'm also pro heading, it turns out. There was a couple sections in particular when I read through it, 10.4 and 10.5 in particular really stood out for me. This is much better than what was there. I really like both of them. After reading through it, I'm always looking for the thing I can ask you questions about. Sorry. And what came to me where I had a question, and I am giving fair warning that this might be a question I end up having during interpretation as well. It says ensure learning environments. Almost all of them say learning environments. Learning environment in 1 and 2 and 3, in 4, in 5. 6 is a bit different. And I think 7 also says learning environments. I want to know what this policy probably applies to, because there's classrooms, but there's hallways, and there's cafeterias, and there's buses, and there's out on the field. Like, what are we looking at here? Can I add one thing? The reason I'm asking this, realize this would be important to say, is because most of them say learning environments, but then 10.6 is a little bit different with the equitable inclusive access. It talks about facilities, learning spaces, and essential school environments. So I just want to make sure that both, that one seems to be everywhere, but that the others are as well, especially safety and protection from harassment, intimidation, and bullying is occurring in all our spaces, not just our classrooms, I guess. And so that's my question to you.
Yeah. So I think because of the policy language, learning environment, treatment of students, I believe it does go across environments. It isn't just about classroom. It really does span the spectrum of where students are interacting, engaging, participating. And so thank you for the heads up around the interpretation of learning environments, or the +1 on the learning environments. No, I appreciate that, because it, and can I also say, this might be the textbook definition of aspirational policy. And I think that's okay, because like aspiring to this for our students, I don't think, it's like saying our goal is 96% graduation. Like, it doesn't suffice. And so having something that we're aspiring to develop and co-create with our students, I think is worth figuring out then how to monitor it.
Director Yoakum.
Just really want to thank everyone, staff and board, for really embracing the students and encouraging our student board reps to go out and gather this information from other students, and just the participation of students in this district that helped contributed to these changes. And I just think that this, to me, I don't have anything specific questions or changes here, but I just think that that process just shows me how important student voice is in our decisions moving forward, and to just kind of always remember this as we move forward with other policy work, that that's a voice that we cannot be forgetting.
I also wanted to mention that Director Yoakum and I, oh gosh, it's been over a month now. Time flies when you're having fun or attending 9 graduations, as the case may be. But we did meet with all 4 of our student reps separately to show this revised policy to them, because it was such big revisions, to walk through this same deck that Dr. Holman just walked us through. And to get their feedback, to make sure that even before we thought about bringing that to the board, that our students had a chance to look at that and say whether or not it reflected their feedback. And my impression from that conversation, and we spent quite a while, I think about an hour and a half walking through all of this. And what I took away is that the language, especially this policy language, really does hit the mark and does encapsulate some all of the board's values really very effectively, including our students' values. There were a couple of areas that I just wanted to call out that I sort of took notes on from the conversation, that I think go more into thinking about that interpretation. We spent quite a bit of time talking about the repair harm language that's in 10.4. The students really wanted to emphasize that repair harm means not just addressing, for example, if you have an instance where a student A is bullying student B, there's work to do with student A to to work through that situation, but there's also work to do with student B. And to me, that language, repair harm, does speak to that it's not enough to just say, oh, there was harm, we're going to address the perpetrator, if you will, but really to make sure that all the students involved are repaired, or those relationships are repaired. So I think that I don't think that sort of loop back was clear to the students. They knew that it was important to them, and I don't think the policy language needs to change. It's just really making that really clear through the interpretation. That's really what's there for. They also emphasized in that same 10.4, established systems, that they really need to be easy for students to enter. And actually, Dr. Holman, I think you were speaking directly to this earlier when you said we have established systems, but if students don't know about it, then is that effective? So I think your head is in the right place, and just emphasizing that the students saw that as well and really wanted that emphasized. One other part, in 10.4, really emphasizing that practices, so ensuring that there are practices to prevent, address, and repair harm, that's really a system-wide responsibility. That it's not just admin's responsibility, it's not just Director Fu's team's responsibility, that those practices need to be widespread throughout our system, because there are many individuals who are in these learning environments and interacting with our students. So making sure that that's really clear, that's a shared responsibility for everybody. And the final thing around sort of 10.5 and 10.6 with facilities and access to facilities and so on, I think particularly in 10.6 is also that loop back and communication of if a student submits some sort of facilities request or has a concern about facilities, how are we making sure that, yes, we're fixing the problem, that's very clear, that access is important from this language, but also that communication with students. So as I said, I'm comfortable with the policy language as is, but I thought those were some really good points of emphasis coming from our students to think about certainly values that I share, and so just making sure that those are known as we continue forward with this policy, and that we're making sure that that those are ultimately expressed in how our system is responding to this policy. Any other? I will turn on my microphone. Sorry, I said, are there any questions? But I heard head shakes no. Then I will now entertain a motion to adopt the proposed revisions to OE10 Learning Environment Treatment of Students as presented.
So moved.
Seconded.
It has been moved by Director Yoakum and seconded by Director Meekhoff to adopt the proposed revisions to OE10 Learning Environment Treatment of Students as presented. Is there further discussion? Director Richter?
Actually, that was an I'm all good sign.
All right. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
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 All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. So I think we can proceed with the what is in the draft work plan that we were just looking at to come back with hopefully interpretation indicators in August and maybe finally finish this policy for now. All right. Next item on the agenda is a first reading of the 2026-27 budget. Dr. Holman.
Great. So as the team comes up and gets the presentation ready, there's going to be three of us presenting tonight. I will launch us, and then Associate Superintendent Posthumus will take it from there, and then Executive Director DeVita will provide the details in the numbers for us tonight. And so, great, we can go to the next slide. And so tonight in our presentation, we'll go over policies, process, timeline. We will do an overview of all of our funds. We'll talk about general fund revenues and expenditures, and then talk about next steps related to adoption of the budget. As you know, we work to align our budget with who we say we're about, our mission, our vision, the idea of equipping every student for a successful future. We've done some work related to our strategic framework, and and before we do that, let's talk about the objective. My apologies. And this is a statement that we've actually included in a number of communications to the community, presentations to the board, but really our objective is to maintain a balanced budget while maintaining budget reserves to ensure unforeseen changes or events, to make sure that we don't have a local financial crisis. And that takes due diligence every year. And that means we're analyzing, starting early in the year, what revenue expenditures are going to look like in years to come, doing the requisite work if we need to make reductions in expenditures, such that we can continue to achieve this objective of having a balanced budget. We did some work to think about how are we aligning our budget work, spending reductions with our strategic commitments, equitable, just systems, inclusive, rigorous learning, integrated sustainability, and operational excellence. So I just want to spend a little time just talking through some of those pieces, and I want to start with commitment 1. And since 23-24, we did a look back over the last few years, knowing that anytime we're making a large strategic change or budget reductions, those really are multi-year processes. And so, as you know, our high school and reinvestment, the lion's share of the reinvestment was in staffing back to our schools. And along with that staffing was a framework that really was an equity-driven framework for how that FTE would be applied. And so they really looked at, who are the students that that are furthest from justice, who, what are the classes we have the highest failure rates, what are services students need to be able to be on track to graduate from high school. Our behavioral health and supports, just a few years ago, we added to the budget to ensure that our middle schools had full-time behavioral health support. I believe there's one other that I'm not remembering around the behavioral health. But and then when we think about supports, this is, as we think about our most recent EP&O levy, we also have been hearing from our schools, and this is since the pandemic, and as our school environments change, we know that we need to think about what are the supports that need to come alongside our schools as student needs are changing. And so in the behavioral supports area, there's kind of two components that are being added to Johnny Fu's team. One is really behavioral response. So a school is experiencing a situation where it's a student that has escalated behaviors or behaviors that the school hasn't had to respond to before. And this is a team that will go embed themselves in the school, help the school identify resources, plans to really help that school team work with the educators, the staff, the student to get them back on track. And so really, those that are steeped in behavioral supports going into schools. We also know that there's a number of our schools that have students coming to us whom have high trauma in their background, and knowing that there are intersections with levels of poverty, with things such as that, and so identifying some actual staffing support for those schools that isn't periodic, that is actually there. And so our title schools, we also know Ella Baker has an apartment community that, many of the students, and that's a community that doesn't have the social services that other communities do. And so just trying to be mindful and thoughtful of the students that are coming to us with varying needs, and how do we think about supports for them. And so that'll be articulated to you in much greater depth and detail at a future date, but just wanted, like, those supports are embedded in this budget that you're seeing tonight. Health services and expansion there over the last few years. Language access, we know that we received the requirements related to language access are quite significant, and rightfully so. We know that receiving information in a language you actually can understand. I know that sounds so simple, and it is so important. And so we received a grant in, I think it was 2 years ago, from OSPI. We hired a staff member related to language access. In this budget you're receiving tonight, it is represented that those grant funds have been cut in half, but we are maintaining our language access position because we know how important that service is. And you all have met Brahenia, and she's come and presented to the board. The work she's doing is really phenomenal. Just a quick note about her kind of visioning and work at the recent graduations at Alaska Air Arena. She brought forward an idea of individuals whom need translation services during the graduation ceremonies. She had a digital solution for that. And so I think it was between 55 and 65 individuals received translation services to access their family member, their friend, their child's graduation experience, including, and I don't remember which school it was, the student speaker who spoke in both English and Spanish. Their family was able to hear the entire speech and graduation in a language that they understood. So you know, like a once in a lifetime moment, and to be able to participate in that is really, really incredible. Also, anytime we're thinking about program reviews, and specifically our highly capable program review, while that we didn't hire someone to come in, like we had some consultants providing information and things like that, but by and large it was internal staff. But the allocation of time and resource that goes into that, and that really was rooted in access, in thinking about our systems. And as you know, we're continuing to think about our systems deeply related to highly capable identification. The rules seem to continue to change always. So that's a commitment one. I won't go into that depth for all of the commitments, but think about inclusive and rigorous learning. We talked about the high school reinvestment. This year you'll see in the budget, we filled a gap for our middle schools with our athletic director and activities coordinator. What we required our schools to have those positions. They're released from the classroom. It's 0.2 each, so essentially 1 period a day release. Yet we required our middle schools to use their basic allocation to fill that 0.4. And we continue to hear from our schools. I'm going on a decade of hearing the gap that created for our schools. And so we went ahead and filled that gap because just of what we're asking our schools. We ask our schools to engage in co-teaching, and when you start limiting staffing, you start limiting opportunities for students. And so filled that gap. We have a dean of students at all of our secondary schools, and so that's at our comprehensive middle schools, comprehensive high schools. And that's something that we added right around the time of COVID, and then we continued that in our Move Ahead budget just a few years ago. I talked earlier about restorative practices. You know, our deans are really important in that because of the amount of time it takes. Our elementary staffing model, last year you heard us talk about thinking about our intermediate elementary grades differently. We instituted the option for our schools to use a 4-5 option. That is to make sure that we have more consistent class sizes at the intermediate level, so that we're not increasing our primary classes inadvertently. And so this allowed us to shift some of the staffing from intermediate to elementary. You know about our instructional coaching model. That's a large investment. Paraeducator staffing, we added about $1 million worth of paraeducator staffing to the budget last year. We're maintaining that in this budget, even as we're not growing in special education. Special services staffing, as you know, we added an additional director at the elementary level this year, so that we have 3 executive directors of schools, 3 directors of schools, and I look forward to facilitating a conversation with Dr. Rose, Dr. Hitch, and their teams to really talk about what does it mean to collaborate as a director team to support schools? What are the commitments we're making to one another in that relationship? What are we prioritizing? And because this, like, the intention of this is to provide a greater level of service and support to our schools in service of our students' inclusionary practices and systems. In our building administrative model this year, we reevaluated that staffing model. We did a couple of things. One, with a couple of our schools dropping below 300 students, we actually changed the baseline staffing for elementary to, rather than 1.5, which it was previously, to 1.0. And in doing that, we also identified some, I'll just say, equity staffing components, and really the indicator was related to percent students qualifying for free and reduced lunch, to prioritize additional staffing there. And so we will have a much different administrative staffing allocation at the elementary level next year. Things such as Redmond Elementary will actually have 2.5 administrators, where this year they have 2.0. In a school like Wilder, below 300, not a high impact of free and reduced, they'll have 1 administrator, so a single principal. And so we actually broadened the spectrum of what administrative staffing looks like at our schools, but it was for intentional reasons. As you know, we're developing out an international baccalaureate program at ICS. That does come with required resource, and our instructional resource adoptions. As you know, those are big investments. In Commitment 3, integrated sustainability. It's interesting as I look at the investments, it feels very much like when we hired a director of equity. We had a single FTE and a budget of about $10,000. And then kind of year over year, staffing grew, and as we understood more about it, it feels similar here, where the first step we took was, well, the board adopted policy. Maybe that was the first step. But really, as we think about operations, it was to hire an associate director, identify a program budget. From that, the work related to the sustainability plan development. We've also, we actually partnered with City of Kirkland related to the food services sustainability roadmap. And so again, this is a commitment that is growing and building, and that's the framework at this point. And then operational excellence. We could have gone on and on related to the various operational changes, just a few that have broad impact. The shift from skyward to cumulative, AKA Skyward 2.0. It impacted every person, every staff member in the district. It affected every student in the district, all parents and families accessing. And so that was a substantial change. Departments had to change their processes. The team had to make sure 4,500 employees were paid on time when we switched over. I mean, it was a massive uplift that is still continuing. And so the team continues to work on that transition. We shifted to new transportation routing platform. And this, I asked for the term platform to be used because, yes, we're routing and doing all of the work, kind of the behind the scenes transportation, but parents also have access to their own child's location and route. We implemented a centralized facility use online management tool, and that was one that we learned a few things about what we didn't know when we launched that, and so we're striving towards operational excellence with that, and as we continue to implement that. And then the last item here related to operational excellence, as you think about just the overall budget work that comes with as we're contracting as a district, and as we're right-sizing our budget, and as we're trying to drive as many resources to our classrooms as possible. It's a look at the central office and our staffing levels here. And so you saw in a presentation a couple weeks ago is a reduction of 18.9. Well, as we kind of went back through and did the math, it's actually over 30 FTE here at the central office that have been reduced since 23-24. And so as you think about really keeping resources as close to our students as possible, while also ensuring that the central system can support our schools. It's a balance, but as you know, that 30 FTE adds up to significant dollars. And so just, thank the team for helping to align this, because I think it's a really important part of the budget work.
And I'll just add that, like, the first three bullet items, we're fortunate our technology and capital facility levies helped provide resources to support those efforts as well. So, all right, well, I'm going to jump in and talk about our budget policies and process and timeline. The work that we do in budget is related to, we have policies around that. And so this policy 6000 requires, it drives our work, and it provides for staff participation, sharing recommendations with the board, sharing information about the budget, which we're doing tonight with citizens prior to action. It talks about our budget process. So as a district, we solicit input from department and program leaders. We share information with our strategic administrative leadership team for feedback. We also share it with staff, with community, with our budget advisory committee during the year. And then we've provided budget updates with our board in earlier study sessions and board meetings. So this section of Policy 6000 really talks about the annual budget hearing, and that has to happen, is required to happen no later than August 31st, that the board shall hold a public hearing, and we'll talk about when we're going to do that later on in the presentation. So the other part, is this moving? Let's see, here we go. The other OE5, the operational expectations related to the budget, is OE5, financial planning. This talks about that the budget should disclose assumptions and assure fiscal soundness. Also included in the OE5 expectations is that the budget is informed by demographic data and enrollment projections. And then that we provide necessary information to the board on matters that impact the budget and assumptions. And then it also provides, requires an ending fund balance of no less than 7% of projected revenue. So this ensures adequate reserves in case of emergency. So the timeline, we presented at the June 1 study session, the preliminary budget, we shared preliminary budget information. Tonight, we're sharing the budget presentation regarding the proposed budget. The budget will be available on the website after tonight. It is available within the board materials tonight. Then June 22nd through August 2nd is a public comment period, so we are open to feedback or questions relating to the budget. And then August 3rd will be the public hearing, and then formal board action to adopt the budget occurs at the second meeting in August on August 17th. Again, the requirement is no later than August 31st. The budget must be adopted. So just a reminder as well that we are the only district in the state of Washington that achieves the Meritorious Budget Award. This is evidence, we've received it for the last 9 years. This is evidence of our commitment to continuous improvement. Our staff work really hard to put that together, and we get notified each January. We submit our budget in the fall and then are notified each January. And then as part of the budget work, the community engagement, as I've shared, we share continuous updates with our board at study sessions and board meetings, provide enrollment updates, legislative updates, and then our budget advisory committee, again, meets throughout the school year. So I'm going to, before I have Melissa come up and present the proposed budget, we're very pleased to present the budget this evening. It's the second year of the biennial budget adopted by the legislature. You'll see that in the 26-27 legislative budget, they provide a COLA of 2.6% and a 5.1 increase to health benefits. And so that's a major driver. That's one of the major drivers of the increases in revenues and expenditures. But the budget also reflects an enrollment decline of almost 2% over the last from the prior year's budget. And that reflects our continuing decline in elementary, but growth in secondary, but overall a net decline. We as a district began a budget alignment process in 23-24. We presented a balanced budget last year, and this budget continues to meet that objectives. So there are two documents in the board materials. One of the documents is what we call the state F-196. I've printed out the big thick document right here, but this is the formal document that the board adopts. It's the format that every district in the state of Washington uses, so it's a consistent format across the state. The second document is the budget summary, what we call the budget information by fund, and it is kind of the main financial pages by each fund. We have a thicker, user-friendly budget summary that we will anticipate to be available either by the August 3rd board meeting or the August 17th board meeting. So again, these documents are available in the board materials tonight, and they'll be available on the district website. I personally want to thank the budget team for all their work. Preparing the budget is a lot of work. We start, it starts back in January, and there's a significant amount of detailed work that goes into preparing the budget, months of preparation. So I'm going to have Melissa DeVita, our Executive Director of Financial Services, come up and go through the budget. So, thank you, Melissa.
Okay, good evening, board. Thank you for this opportunity to present to you what we've been spending our last, 5 months doing. Let's see. Here we go. So the district budget is made up of 5 different funds, and we'll do an overview of each fund on the next few slides. These 5 funds make up a total of $990 million that the district is responsible for oversight of. I'll spend most of my time this evening on the general fund, which is by far the largest. The first is the capital projects fund. Budget expenditures for this include debt service fund. Oh, I see how this is working. Okay, is the debt service fund. Budget expenditures for this include principal and interest from previously sold bonds, including LGO bonds that were sold in June of 2024 and then just recently in June of 2026. On June 16th, the district just refunded bonds, saving taxpayers about $5.1 million over the life of those bonds. Refunding bonds is very similar to when you refinance your house and get a lower interest rate and save money over the life of your own loan. We also sold additional LGO bonds to ensure capital projects can open on time and reduce the impact of construction escalation on those projects. In all of our bond transactions, the district uses an underwriter to ensure the lowest cost for taxpayers. The Capital Projects Fund is next, and expenditures and revenues for this fund include both the 2022 and 2026 technology and capital project levy projects, as well as the 2022 and 2024 construction levy projects. Expenditures also include transfers from the Capital Projects Fund to the General Fund for ongoing technology applications and training, and this is due to state accounting requirements. It also includes a transfer from the Capital Projects Fund to the Debt Service Fund to pay for the LGO bond principal and interest payments. You will also see some new revenue in this fund this year. There's $4 million that we anticipate receiving for Inflation Reduction Act grants, and this is related to geothermal and solar at Rockwell, Emerson, and the new high school additions at Eastlake and Redmond. In addition, you'll see an additional $2 million in Phase 2 of King County grant funds. This is the second of 3 grants that the district has been awarded, and $4 million in state construction assistance funding. The major expenditures are from the 2022 construction levy, the continued rebuild and enlargement of Rockwell Elementary, which will be opening this coming fall, Eastlake High School addition, which will also be opening in this fall, Redmond High School addition, and the rebuild and enlargement of Emerson High School, which will both be opening in the fall of 2027. And from the 2026 construction levy, we'll be looking at the rebuild and enlarge of Alcott Elementary, opening in the fall of 2027, the rebuild and enlarge of Kamayakin, planned for the fall of 2029, and the upgrade and modernization of the field house and community pool at Juanita High School. The 2022 and 2026 4-year facility and technology projects, such as building improvements, code compliance, school improvements, athletic play field upgrades, and technology infrastructure and equipment will also take place. The Transportation Vehicle Fund is anticipated to spend $2.7 million on the purchase of 12 new buses. The revenue for this fund is from state depreciation, and we have not found it necessary to have a transportation levy since 2001. As a reminder, the district did receive federal and state grants in 2024-25 for the purchase of 4 electric buses that all went into service this past fall. Unfortunately, the state does not have consistent method of funding ongoing purchases of electric buses, and so we'll continue to advocate with our state and federal representatives to support continued use and purchase of electric buses. And finally, the Associated Student Body Fund, more commonly known as the ASB Fund, provides for extracurricular activities such as sports and clubs of each school. The revenues include fundraisers, sales, and sports admission fees. Each school prepares their own plan and budget for the upcoming year. Okay, heading into the general fund. The remaining part of my presentation will focus on the general fund, and this fund provides the money necessary for the day-to-day education and operations of the school district. So enrollment, as you know, is a key driver of both revenue and expenditures of the general fund. This chart shows the history of our enrollment since 2011, and you can see that our enrollment peaked in 2019, right before the pandemic. This enrollment chart is head count, and our head count enrollment has been slowly declining since then due to lower birth rates. For the 26-27 budget, we're projecting a head count enrollment of 29,804 students, which is a decrease of 351 students from this year's actual enrollment. This chart shows the changes in elementary, middle, and high school. The blue portion of the bar represents elementary. Elementary is anticipated to be down 17.9% since the pandemic, or 2,747 students. Orange portion represents middle school. Middle school is only down slightly, 0.5%, or 42 students, while the maroon portion represents high school, and high school is up 17%, or 1,339 students. Our overall change in K-12 is a loss of 1,450 students since 2019, which is 4.7%. The prior chart reflected headcount and compared actual data to our proposed budget. As shared during the study session, however, average annual student FTE, or full-time equivalent students, not headcount, is what the district is funded on and is in our budget. And when we're comparing the 25-26 budget to the 26-27 budget, we're estimating a decrease of 591 average annual FTE. Now, about half of that decline happened this year, and half is projected to happen next year. Our special ed budget to budget is expected to have a net no change. Decreasing preschool will be offset by an increase in the K-12 FTE. We are conservative in our budget when estimating enrollment, and we do not want to overcommit our revenues. We do not want to overcommit our revenues and expenditures. We shared in the study session that we changed the 26-27 budget, how we budget for contingency for enrollment. In the past, we often budgeted 500 additional students in our enrollment and provided additional revenue and expenditures for additional teachers. Contingency in the budget for enrollment in case more students showed up in the fall. And this was helpful when we were growing rapidly. We typically exceeded our projections, thus needing the contingency. However, with declining enrollment, adding 500 students to our enrollment ends up distorting our comparison when we look at budget to actual. And so in the 26-27 budget, we're still budgeting with contingency dollars in both the revenue and the expenditures, which is about $5.5 million, but we're not adding it in our actual enrollment numbers that we're forecasting. And as a reminder, because school districts' expenditure budgets cannot be exceeded without board approval, this contingency does provide us with the ability that if we have more students and need to hire more teachers, we would be able to spend the necessary money to hire those teachers. Okay. So this is what the actual expenditures in the new budget look like, and I want to take some time to walk you through what the differences are. First, we'll go through the revenue, then we'll go through the expenditures. The total increase in revenue for our 25-26 budget is $24 million. Revenues are increasing $9.7 million from the state COLA, which increased, as Barbara said earlier, by 2.6%, plus the changes in the health benefits. Revenues are increasing $1.3 million for changes in the state MSOC allocations and decreasing $0.4 million for the state transportation. The basic ed enrollment declines from budget to budget is also generating a loss of $7.2 million. The educational programs and operations levy increase, which is based on the voter approved amounts from the election earlier this year, is increasing by $15.5 million. Historically, our district's voter approved amounts have been below the state authorized amount. The legislature, however, recently made changes to the levy formula, providing for additional increases, which we are able to take advantage of. As part of our budget alignment, we are also sunsetting the $300,000 transfer of interest from the Capital Projects Fund so that those funds can be used on capital items. Our state and federal grants and self-supporting programs are primarily offset with expenditures, but they include special ed high-cost safety net, which increases both expenditures and revenues to reflect actual costs, enrollment changes for categorical programs like Running Start, Multilingual, LAP, and Skill Center, federal grants such as Head Start, preschool program, and title programs, and then the self-supporting programs such as the extended day and nutrition services. Overall, the change in revenues is anticipated to be $24 million. The next column shows the anticipated changes in expenditures. Expenditures are increasing by $24.2 million from budget to budget, and we'll provide more detail in the next few slides. But in summary, just like on revenue, state COLA and benefit increases, expenditures costs are increasing by $19.2 million, which includes the COLA of $2.6 million, compensation impacts from things like collective bargaining agreements and increments, SEB costs, and pension changes. Costs are higher than state revenues because the district hires more staff than the state funds, and the state does not fund the full cost of what it takes to pay our employees. For materials, supplies, and operating costs, expenditures grew by $4.8 million. Expenditures are expected to be reduced by $4.1 million due to enrollment declines. We expect a small reduction due to budget alignment, and again, state and federal grants and self-supporting programs expenditures are offset with the revenues, leading to a net change of $24.2 million higher, which is higher than revenues. The next 4 slides, I'll walk you through the expenditure changes in more detail. We have been reviewing all openings at the Resource Center and the Support Services Center prior to replacing employees who have left their positions. And as part of that review, we've been able to reduce or combine positions to provide efficiencies, saving $0.1 million during the current fiscal year. And after the budget was adopted last year, we also made some small changes to our deductible on our insurance premiums, which allowed us to reduce the cost of our premiums during the current fiscal year by $0.2 million. However, for 26-27, the Washington State Risk Management Pool insurance passed on a significant increase to districts across the state. Lake Washington School District is experiencing a $3.9 million increase, which is equivalent to 62%. Our insurance premiums now total over $10 million. This is an increase over the last 9 years from $2 million to $10 million. In addition, our utility costs will continue to increase. Without our sustainability and energy efficiency measures that are currently in place, this number would be much worse. And then finally, our election costs are dropping down. Election costs are cyclical and depending upon the year. So next year, there are no board or levy elections, which will result in the reduction. Note that our insurance and utility increases are going to eat up more than we're seeing in our new MSOC funding from the state, which does not allow us to cover actual needs like textbooks, supplies, and contractual services. Staffing and programs are adjusted to enrollment. Expenditures are expected to reduce by $4.1 million due to enrollment. However, this is compared to a loss of revenue of $7.2 million for enrollment. Our staff expenditures for salary, benefits, and pensions will increase due to state changes, but there's also a local impact for staff funding that goes beyond what the state provides us because of local labor agreements and the cost of increments. And finally, grants and self-supporting programs, when revenue increases or decreases, expenditures will do the same. And this does include a $3 million increase due to for added revenues and expenditures for the special ed safety net costs. Finally, there was some budget alignment that we were able to do with a reduction of $500,000. On the reduction side, we had $1.2 million one-time costs that were related to the transition from 6 to 7 period that we could reduce. We also reduced $0.2 million for adaptive PE, FTE, which is 0.1 FTE at each secondary school due to program model changes. And we also reduced transportation by $0.2 million or $200,000 with the replacement of Metro supplemental routes with the yellow buses. On the reinvestment side, as Dr. Holman mentioned, we did reinvest in the middle school activity and athletic release time for staff. We've also invested in the ICS IB program, and then we put additional investments into behavioral services this coming year. Bringing us back to this table, the last column shows the net gain or loss due to the revenue and expenditure changes, and the overall net change is a negative $0.2 million or $200,000. The overall projected gain in fund balance is $2.2 million, which is equivalent to 0.3% of the budget. And you will see later in the 4-year forecast that we will need to continue to align expenditures with revenues to maintain a balanced budget going forward. This will just give you another view of our revenues. It shows the sources of revenues and the percentage of the total budget that each of those make up. The majority of our budget is from state apportionment and is driven by enrollment. So state categorical is state apportionment funding for specific programs, including special education, CTE, Skills Center, lab, multilingual, highly capable, and transportation. The federal funding is title funds, special education and nutrition services, and local fee programs include things like interest earnings, donations, extended day fees, preschool, and athletic participation fees. The other includes the transfers from the Capital Projects Fund. Here is one more view of our revenues. This is what you see in the budget. It compares comparison of the state-defined revenue categories from the prior year budget to the proposed budget. And the overall revenue increase represents a 3.9% from prior year. Majority of this is due to levy, state COLA, benefit pension changes, and increases in special ed safety net contingency. The expenditure budget includes these changes along with fixed costs to meet organizational needs and budget realignment. State apportionment is primarily legislative impacts for COLA, pension and benefits, staffing model, and enrollment. The state categorical primarily is an increase for special ed safety net. The federal reductions are in special ed safety net, which is coming now more from the state. The Title III multilingual grant and the USDA commodities. Levy is increasing based on the 2026 voter approved amounts and the legislative changes. The local fee programs are changing due to moving enrollment contingency here, and small increases in participation fees, like an increase in extended day revenue, and then other increases from the Capital Projects Fund transfer. And this is another view of the expenditures by activity as a % of total budget. The total teaching includes teachers, building-based instructional support, staff like deans, paraeducators, instructional assistants, counselors, librarians, supplies, materials, textbooks, professional development, safety and activities, and athletics. It goes a lot into teaching our kids every day. Building administration includes not only our building administrators, but their office staff as well. Central administration includes more than just the administrators. It also includes office staff and others that are primarily assigned to the central office and that really help the district run, like payroll, human resources, business and finance, and some of the IT staff. I need to mention that Lake Washington School District has one of the lowest central office administration percentages when it's compared to other districts of like size. Maintenance and operations includes custodial, utilities, grounds, and security, and other includes insurance, information systems, and the warehouse. And here's a budget view of expenditures by program. The overall increase is 3.9% due to state funding changes for COLA and benefits and fixed costs. Also included are changes due to enrollment and categorical grants. Okay. Now, this is a legislative requirement to include this MSOC information in the budget process. The state provides funding of $46.1 million. The district budget for MSOC's categories includes $38.1 million. The difference is $8 million, and this is used to improve student achievement in the areas of special education, substitute costs, professional learning, compensation for curriculum work, meetings and trainings. And these are all items that are not chargeable to MSOCs but are related. Much of our curriculum is now digital, so we are now using capital technology levy funds for these expenses. But if we had to pay for that out of our general fund MSOCs, we would not have enough of these resources. All these items have an obvious educational benefit and impact student achievement. All right. I'm going to share some information now on fund balance. And fund balance is like the district's savings account. So here we go. So we are projecting a beginning fund balance of $58.5 million, and it will likely be higher if due to carryover from grants. Our ending fund balance we're projecting with the revenues exceeding expenditures of $2.2 million to be $60.7 million, as expenditures are lower than planned revenue. The district's minimum fund balance is of 7% is approximately $45 million, but our monthly salaries and benefits cost is just over $42 million. Our commitment is always to have 8 to 10% as the minimum fund balance to cover emergencies. And while we do anticipate adding slightly to the fund balance this year and next year, as I said earlier, it is only 0.3% of the total budget, and you will see the longer view from the 4-year forecast. The 4-year outlook is a state requirement as part of the budget document shown in the end of the F-195 document. The district is prudent in its budgeting, and it always has looked beyond a 1-year view and has always done long-term enrollment and financial projections, which helps us make decisions today with a long-term view in mind. The budget plan was prepared taking into account enrollment changes, planned future costs, and legislative mandates. This slide shows the assumptions that we are using when we prepare this 4-year outlook. So for the revenue projections, the forecast assumes an enrollment decline of 1.6% per year, or 1,461 students over the next 3 years. The state provides preliminary projections on COLA for the next 4 years. These are subject to change, and they range from 2.7% to 2.2%, but they will continue to be updated on an annual basis. The forecast also assumes the future levy amounts based on the voter-approved amounts with rollback for enrollment declines, and we don't anticipate any other significant changes in state funding. On the expenditure side, the forecast assumes continued certificated, classified, and administrative staffing that is aligned with our enrollment growth or loss and current staffing ratios. We will continue program reviews and right-sizing staffing based upon those reviews. Ongoing local costs needs will be over state funding for salaries, benefits, and retirements. Ongoing fixed costs will continue to increase due to insurance and utility cost increases, and our budget alignment work will be ongoing. So the gray bars here is revenue changes over time. The blue bars are expenditure changes over time. Over the next 4 years, the goal is to maintain a balanced budget and maintain the ending fund balance meeting the board's minimum requirement of 7%, with a planned balance of 8 to 10%, ensuring adequate reserves in an emergency. You will see in the fourth year that the projections show that expenditures exceed revenues again, so continued budget realignment will be necessary. The 4-year outlook for other funds is contained in the F-195 for you to review. And then finally, as a reminder, there continues to be a gap between what the state funds and what it costs to provide the programs and services our community expects. So for example, over $50 million, there's a $50 million shortfall for CERT staff, as the state does not fund all of the positions or the full cost of any individual position. Athletics and activities is not funded at all by the state. Substitutes are minimally funded, leaving a $6 million shortfall, and $22 million plus shortfall in special education. All right, the proposed budget documents will be available on the district website tomorrow, including the F-195, but hard copies can be obtained from the budget office located here in this building. June 22nd through August 2nd is the public comment period. August 3rd will be a public hearing. And at the August 17th, formal board action will be asked of the board for this budget that is being proposed. At this point, I'd also like to thank the staff in the budget office who have been working very hard over the last 5 months, and we would love to entertain any questions you may have.
Any questions from the board?
We couldn't have been that thorough.
Director Yocum.
I guess I just have a question about the MSOC slide, slide 40, and maybe to just explain, because I know that that's what we've heard a lot of throughout the state of, like, this is one thing that is not funded. And so to see that the state is funding this, but then our expenditures are less than, so it's completely funded. Can you just speak to that a little bit, please? Thank you.
Yeah. I think the reality is, from an accounting standpoint, but as Melissa talked about, we have so many expenditures that are related to, you know, I'll use curriculum as an example. We can't charge our curriculum committee work and all the work that goes into purchasing our updated curriculum. We can't charge that to MSOC, but it's still a cost that supports those functions. Substitutes is another example. It is not funded, so we're having to use the MSOC money that the state allocates to support those costs. So along with levy funds as well. So all of there's many things that go into you know, the extra cost beyond staff positions, beyond material supplies and operating costs. So.
And there's still a statewide deficit for MSOC, so looking across all districts.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We're in a different position.
Yeah.
It's not that all districts have that same financial picture.
And we do pull out of our numbers. I'm not sure if other districts do that. We pull out of our numbers our running start, which is primarily MSOC related, contractual related. We receive revenues and outgoing expenditures, and then our transfers. All districts are required to charge technology training and software to the general fund, and then transfer those funds from the technology levy. And so we do pull those out of those numbers. Go ahead.
Not every district.
You're talking to Mike.
Sorry about that. But not every district has a technology levy, and so some of those districts also need to charge those costs to MSOC. So some of it is very district dependent upon what additional local funds that they have and can use in various ways.
Any other questions? Director Richter?
I am trying to decide how much to ask, just because I am curious about things and what actually really matters to this discussion. I guess one question I have is insurance. Obviously, that was a really big number this year. And two things that I know of that drive insurance costs up are insurance providers worrying about replacement costs for buildings, but also legal exposure, lawsuit costs. Is there any visibility into what drove that fund up so bad this year? And is it a statewide thing, or was it about us in particular?
No, we don't believe it was about, I mean, we have been, our experience with the losses that we've had in our district have been what we believe to be average or minimal, you know, below average. I guess I'll use that word. So, but I think insurance, you know, property and liability insurance is a challenging area right now with, you know, we've had insurers, we're part of a statewide risk pool. And so it isn't just about our losses, it is about the losses of every district that is part of that risk pool. And so, you know, there's been a couple of insurance providers that have pulled out of insuring, you know, the risk pool, and then I think they're also seeing that really some of the settlements for certain liability issues have been increasing across the state, and so some of the premium increases is related to estimates of those things. So we are continuing to work with our risk pool to kind of look at our premium increase and ensure that it is the right number for our district based on what we believe our experience to be. So we are continuing to look at our options related to that. But we had to put a budget together, and so, but just like we did last year, we did make some adjustments after the budget was developed. We adjusted some deductibles last year, and so again, we're looking at different options going forward. And so should we make any changes, we will let you know.
All right. If there are, Jim, one more question?
At least one. I think I'll try to hold myself to one. I lost my note page where I actually keep my thoughts as the meeting goes on. The expenditure program summary slide, whichever one that was. Mm-hmm. It went by quick, and that was information I for some reason felt like I hadn't seen before, and so I was curious about it. Now I don't know where it is.
It's slide 39.
Thank you.
And I can, we can go back to it.
I think my question goes down to is if there's anything you want to elaborate on this slide, but also the numbers are, 10.4 in one place, 0.3 in another. It's not like a consistent number anywhere. And so just kind of what's going on with this particular data or these numbers?
So some of the most significant increases, so for example, the Skill Center increase, which is 10.4%, it's a small program, but it's been getting significant enrollment increases. And so that's why you're going to see a significant increase in those expenditures. It's from enrollment. Same with ALE. It's a very small program, and that's from staffing mix. So just changing a few staff members there, if they're more experienced and higher paid, it's going to have a pretty significant impact on the overall expenditures for that program. District-wide support, the big significant increase there is our insurance. So you're looking at a total increase of $5 million. Well, $3.9 million of that is our insurance increase there. So it just really depends on which program that you're looking at in terms of what's really driving it. And it's different across all those programs. Do you want to add to some of those?
Yeah, I'll just add to the decrease in compensatory ed, because that is the one program that you'll see is decreasing. And compensatory education is a combination of state grants and federal grants. So those are funds that are restricted to those specific purposes. And so the reason that there's a couple of decreases in that area, and then there's some increases. So the the decreases are our Title III, our English proficiency grant. Preschool is declining. We've had some changes, lower enrollment in our preschool, so reduction of one classroom in the budget. Our ML enrollment is declining, so that program is declining. But within that area, we also have some increases. Some of our grants are increasing slightly. Our Title I grant is increasing slightly. Title II is increasing. We originally, the language access grant, as Dr. Holman talked about, that was a 2-year grant, and we thought it was going to sunset last year, so we removed it from the budget. And at the last, in August, we were told you're getting it back. So we are putting it back in the budget this year. So there's just a lot of grant changes in that program. And the details, you can find the details of all of these in the information by fund. The expenditure budget is on page 7, 8, and 9 in that detailed attachment. So you can go program by program. And again, we're happy to answer any specific questions. After tonight, if you dig into it, that's kind of this open period for not only you, but for our public as well. If there's questions on any specific items in the budget, we'd be happy to answer them.
All right. If there are no further questions, thank you for all the work that came into bringing this forward.
Thank you.
And looking forward to continuing to discuss in August.
Thank you.
All right. I think we'll move on. We've just got a couple last items here. We good with that? Yeah. All right, next item on the agenda is school visits and community affairs. This portion of the business meeting of the board is an opportunity for any board members to inform and to provide updates from school visits or from organizations or groups they engage with on behalf of LWSD. Are there any updates from the board? Yeah, I think the biggest update would be graduations, yes, has occupied quite a bit of time, even before the last board meeting, right? Because the very first one was the ENAP graduation on May 31st. But then, yes, we did our sprint of 9 graduations over 6 days. Wonderful. Congratulations to the class of 2026. Always fun to just see each graduation has its own unique spirit, I'll say. And so it was really fun to just spend time with the students, families, staff from those different communities, and to see the culmination of lots of hard work on the part of the students graduating, and of course on the part of staff that had supported them all the way through. Yes, so thank you for those invitations, and congratulations again. Any other updates? That was a lot of time. Any committee updates from anyone? Nope. All right. The board plans to meet next on August 3rd, 2026, with a 5 p.m. study session and a 7 p.m. board meeting. I will now entertain a motion to adjourn the June 22nd, 2026 board meeting.
So moved.
Seconded.
It has been moved by Director Liberty and seconded by Director Meekoff that we adjourn. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. The meeting is adjourned at 9:16 p.m.